Greetings. We here at PLD Projects want to make it known that we wholeheartedly support the strikes by both SAG-AFTRA and the WGA against the greedy corporate studio executives. It is a fight for basic human decency. Our reviews, discussions, and critiques are in no way supporting the studios, merely dissecting the art and how these wonderful actors and writers continue to influence us on a daily basis. We thank you. Is it a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? No, just long away. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to PLD Projects Crown Jewels. I am your host, PLD. And if you're listening on the audio field, the PLD Projects audio feed, or watching on the PLD Projects Crown Jewels YouTube channel, welcome or welcome back. If you can, do me a favor, click that like, click that subscribe, leave a comment after you're done. It really helps out the channel. We really want to try to build this thing out as best as possible. But why are you here? You're here to listen to me talk about Queen. The greatest rock and roll band in the history of rock and roll, as far as I'm concerned. We are going to take you on a journey through Queen, every single song, every single solo song, all the different versions of those songs. Let's determine which version of every song is the best version of the said song so we can put it into our ultimate playlist. It's been a great week on Queen for me. I've been listening a lot to the Starfleet Project, Brian May's mini album that was just reissued as a double CD and also as a box set. He did a mini album in 1983. How does 3 tracks become a box set? Well, he got a lot of extra outtakes featuring Brian May and, of course, Eddie Van Halen, which is what the most notable thing about the box set or the album was Brian and Eddie trading licks back and forth, a bunch of blues-based riffs, a lot of fun had in that studio, big-time jam sessions between two of the greatest guitarists in the history of guitar. Yeah, it's very cool, very cool. But that's 1983, and I can't wait to get there. But we're not there yet. We're in 1976. 1976, the song "Long Away" from the "A Day at the Races" album, the third track on "A Day at the Races," and this is if you take my breath away was kind of the love of my life from Night at the Opera for "A Day at the Races." This is kind of 39. This is a acoustic based track written by Brian May and sung by Brian May, featuring Brian, again, like I said, a lead and backing vocals, all the guitars. Freddie does appear on backing vocals. John is on that bass, and Roger does drums and backing vocals. And it's a very interesting case, in that this is the only time, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe this is the only time in the history of the band, during the Freddie era, I should say, the Queen song was released that wasn't featuring Freddie on lead vocals. This was a single, kind of a secondary single, kind of a last minute single, not really pushing very hard and didn't do too well in the charts. And it was only released in the United States. In the US on June 7th, 1977, it did not chart. I don't know if the American fans weren't ready to hear a Queen song that wasn't sung by Freddie. And I guess Brian says it wasn't pushed very hard either, kind of half-assed it. Either way, it was a single, though. It technically was a single. Brian does have some regrets about that. He kind of wished this is one of those songs that he wished had hit it out big a little bit further. He could have lived a little bit longer, had it lived a longer shelf life, so to speak. Doesn't stop him from playing it, but he doesn't. He tends to want to play the hits for the crowd. So these are the kind of songs that struggle to see the light of day, even in current tours. But we have a couple versions of this to listen to, not very many. We have the album version, as I mentioned. There is a convention demo, which was an instrumental demo. Of course, it does mean we have to hear the property of Queen Productions, which of course means I'm not going to rank it. I'm not going to count it as a crown jewel, but I'll let you listen to it for yourself so you can hear it. Now, officially, this wasn't played live by the Freddie era Queen. It was rehearsed. It was rehearsed for the 77 tour, but the band never found a comfortability. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Freddie was singing it, because that's what happened a few times. And no sleeping on the sidewalk and Night of the News of the World, which we'll get to. Featured Brian on lead vocals on the album. He did play it live once or twice, and the recording we get is Freddie singing it. Freddie sang 39 live, so maybe Freddie would have sung "Long Away" live. And I wish to God that would have happened, because it would have been interesting to hear it. Again, Brian's great on this. I love hearing Brian. This is the kind of track I like hearing Brian sing on. Like, give me all the alternate takes. I want every single alternate take. I want Roger singing it. Hell, give me John singing it. Well, maybe not John Hunter. But either way, it was not played live during the Freddie era, just like a sound check. That has never leaked. It was played live, kind of. Queen and Paul Rogers tour era. Brian used to kind of every once in a while would slip something in when he had his little acoustic mini session. Times on the tour, he would play a much highly edited down version, like a minute or so, minute 30 snippet type of version, not the full song, but still interesting enough to hear. So we'll play that. And finally, there's one concert that it was played at, kind of a legendary concert for Queen fans in a way, but not a Queen concert. In 2010, after the Queen and Paul Rogers union had kind of split and went its ways, before Adam Lambert came around, Brian and Roger were still, hanging out with each other, still making music as they could. And of course, one of their best friends in the rock and roll world is Taylor Hawkins, as I've mentioned before. Taylor Hawkins and the Foo Fighters. Many times Brian and Roger have guested with the Foo Fighters. This time, it was Taylor Hawkins and his side project, Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders. Roger appeared on the Taylor and the Hawkins Coattail Riders album, as did Brian May, on separate tracks, interestingly enough. Roger on a track called In Your Shoes, Brian on a track called Way Down. But they still loved hanging out and playing with each other. And when Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders played the Scala in London in 2010, well, he invited Brian and Roger to come along. And I wish I could have been there. And even if I couldn't have been there, what I really wish is we got a good recording of it. We are going to listen to a little bit of the recording because they did play Long Away. Brian on vocals, Roger on drums, Taylor helping out on drums as well. It was a great concert, a great little set list, mini set list they had. They did In Your Shoes first, then they went to I'm in Love with Your Car, then Sleeping on the Sidewalk, barely ever done live, especially since Brian May last did it as Another World Tour, but a very rarely played song. Long Away, like I mentioned. Tenement Funster, it's the only time I think we've ever heard Brian play on Tenement Funster. I could be wrong on that, but Queen never did it. Roger did it on solo tours, and then he closed with Way Down. I wish we had a good version of it. You're going to hear the versions we got. There's a lot of feedback. Unfortunately, it's very sad we got that, because this was kind of a cool setup compared to the usual greatest hits shows we've been getting with Queen and Paul Rogers and Queen and Adam Lambert. I understand the greatest hits setup we do. I understand that, but this is kind of a cool alternative. But we shall get there. We definitely shall get there. Let's go right to the album version. Listen to the album version first. Come back and we'll talk about it. I'll give you some notes and quotes, and then we will go from there. Now, if you look below in the description, you will see I have some YouTube links down there for you to click on. We're going to pause when we get to these certain times in the podcast, like now. You'll pause the podcast, click on the link, in this case for the album version, listen to it, and then come back and I will talk about it. Without further ado, click that link for the album version of Long Away and come back for more. All right, there you have it, the album version of Long Away. Now, this is the first time on a Queen song that Brian's main guitar wasn't the Red Special. Throughout, I think he used the Burns 12-string. He wanted to use a Rickenbacker for specific sound, specifically for his love for John Lennon, but he found it uncomfortable. I believe the neck was the issue. In fact, there's a quote from Brian about that in Guitar World 1998. I couldn't play Rickenbackers because the necks are too thin. I like a very fat and wide neck. My fingers only work in that situation. I always wanted to play Rickenbacker because John Lennon did. Roger collects extremely fucking rare guitars, and he has a Rickenbacker, but I can't play it. So instead, he used a Burns 12-string for a similar sound, and it actually comes off very well. Though it adds a different quality to the sound that a lot of the Queen songs don't have. In fact, this feels less Queen and almost more, I want to say more Byrds, more Roger McGuinn, a little bit of Beatles obviously thrown in there as well. And it might be why some of the press actually enjoyed this song quite a bit on the reviews for A Day at the Races. The journalists were never very fond of Queen, especially during the time they were first running around. But they did like this song for that reason, because it had a different feel to it. But it's a beautiful song. It really is a beautiful song. A few more quotes I want to throw in there before I break down a little bit in the actual song itself. Two quotes, one from Freddie. Long Away is a 12-string thing written by Brian with very interesting harmonies. Well, Freddie's comment on it. And it's funny because like if you listen to it again, it's very Freddie is, I think Freddie's credited with backing vocals, but it's very much a Brian and Roger vocal song. I believe I could pick Freddie out at certain moments. It's kind of funny because they're such distinctive voices. When all three of them sing together, they have this kind of tone to them that you can almost like not pick out one specific voice. I got to be honest with you. You told me later on that Freddie wasn't in this at all. I'd be shocked in that there's no specifically piercing Freddie note. There is a Roger note that's specifically definitively Roger, which we'll get to. But yeah, Brian actually later on in 1982 said, if I'm honest, I think I would like to be remembered for a few of the songs, none of which were really hits, but some of which had a lot of emotion in them. White Queen and Let Us Sing Together. It's Teo Toriati, which is at the end of this album. We'll get to that. And Long Away off the Day It Races album. And then We'll Rock You. I don't know why I said that, because that was definitely a big hit. But all right, let's go on then to the actual song itself. I really love it. It starts on the left-hand side of the stereo. Kind of, if you're not used to Queen, you're kind of like, oh, is my headphones fully plugged in? I don't know. Well, it is. They are. It just, that's the way it starts, and it kind of comes in. That's when it comes to that full stereo sound. Brian's voice, again, this is the type of song I like hearing Brian sing. He occasionally sings some rocking stuff, like when he's live and being the front man for his own band. But if I have to be honest, this is definitely the kind of song that suits his voice best. This has got one of my favorite John Deacon bass lines. There's some great moving, traveling bass during like, he'll wake up in the morning and he doesn't stand still. It's always like, it's almost like he's playing hot bass. Like that's an album we're gonna get to, but it's like he kind of like just doesn't stay still. And I love that. It's kind of this little like traveling bass. It's just a very moving, and it adds that character to the song that you keep moving with it. Just let you just kind of let it wash over you. There's parts of the Queen choir that you washes over you, but the song itself keeps moving because of this bass line. Freddie does say there's some interesting harmonies, and there are some great interesting harmonies. Did we leave our way behind us? Did we leave our way behind us? They're adding on a little more harmonies until that little bit I was talking about with Roger before. Look for the day. It's got that great Roger, that great growl into it, but definitely got that huskier sound to it, which is very cool. Very cool. Let's see, there's a very artfully done solo. Nothing burning, that's not kind of fast. You're not going to be a slasher. It's like, wow, it's going to kill you, but it's just kind of very nice. It's nicely picked, has some fades out as a tone fades out before we get back into the last verse. It's just artfully done. I do enjoy it. I guess at the end, I want to point out John's bass work again during the last verse. Very prominent, catchy at this point. It's just that everything else is down. You just hear that on top. You really follow along, really kind of gets you going with that, keeps you involved with the song. Has some nice choirs at the end. Then, of course, at about 3 minutes, we get that false ending. And then it comes back in for another like little mini verse at the end, some more harmonies. Then Brian kind of lets it end on a, I don't want to say unresolved. It's not an unresolved note, but it's kind of that like lets it fade. There's an ending, but it kind of like the meaning of the song, the tone of the song is kind of like at the end. It's really good. I really do enjoy that song. To see what I rated at the end, but it's one of those songs that I kind of forget how much I like until I listen to it again. All right, we're not going to actually take time to listen to the instrumental demo, the convention demo, as it were, because I've mentioned before, I don't ever rate those. It's just the quality of sound specifically. Because if you haven't heard before, the convention demo, what it is that the Queen fan conventions, Greg Brooks would often bring around something from the archive, usually earlier takes, demo versions, alternate takes, alternate vocal versions. Very interesting and very cool thing is they're supposed to be specifically for the audience. They're not supposed to get released anywhere else. They're certainly not supposed to be taped and then leaked out to the rest of the public. That's not the idea. That the paying conventioneers are supposed to be able to get their exclusive. That's what it's there for. So I cannot say I condone any of this. I also cannot say I have the strong moral quality that I could avoid listening to it because I'm curious. I do like to hear it. So I will listen when they leak. But I don't condone it. And if it didn't leak, I would be perfectly understanding and happy about that for the conventioners getting their own exclusive listen. Of course, also what that means is, though, because of that, he always has over the top. You'll hear him saying property of Queen Productions a bunch of times that the bootleggers can't try to make any money off of it because it's not good enough quality. So I won't rank it, but I give you the YouTube link so you can listen to it because it's an interesting listen. I'll give you that. It's an interesting listen. So there we go. We're gonna move on now to the live versions. The two live versions we have. Well, more like one and a half. The first one we'll listen to is the Queen and Paul Rogers live in Japan from 2005. Not very long. It's just Brian starting it off basically, but it's still interesting to listen to, and I'll put in the rankings for that. Link is below, like always. Come back. We'll talk about it after we're done. And so there it is. Like I said, it's only about a minute long. It's just Brian and the guitar. And again, this is not actually a planned part of the set list. This is not like they went out and we're going to do this minute long version. This is Brian kind of improvising a bit. It's very rare to get a lot of improv stuff during Queen concerts because Queen concerts are so set up as like experiences, big theatrical, with big lights, big sound, and they got to be heavily, planned out and everything else. So it's kind of hard to get too much in the way of improv. One of the few times they can do is Brian grabs the acoustic guitar to Love My Life. He kind of sometimes will sit out there and he will just start, he'll start playing the guitar and whatever comes to mind. Of course, one of the songs that he wishes people knew might be one of those songs every once in a while. Now, of course, the studio version, or if this was going to be done live, like really planned out and done live, we would have had a lot more big of a setup. The bass would have been heavy there. Roger would have been there, of course. So this is more of a fun time thing than anything else, right? It's nice to hear, and I hope Brian continues to do this up until the day he stops touring. Throw those random tracks in the middle. It's a nice little peek out for the fans. It's nice. It's a nice version. Not much to say. All right. Finally, we're going to listen to the Taylor Hawkins and Coattail Riders with Brian and Roger from 2010 live in London. I warn you, you might not be able to get through this only because of the sound quality. When the drums come in, there's a little bit of feedback, and the sound quality is pretty downright terrible. I listen because I want to hear it done right. But it's a stretch. It's a stretch. I gotta warn you. Before you go. So if you dare, listen to it below, and then come back and we'll finish up the episode. Well, there you had it. I try to tell you, but you know what? I'm so excited to get to hear that every once in a while. I try to put those headphones on, turn it down a little bit so the feedback doesn't get to me. But I do like getting to hear at least what I get to hear. I love Taylor Hawkins. He's always been I've always been a big fan of Taylor Hawkins even before I knew how much he loved Queen like I did. But what I loved about his friendship with Queen is he was always pushing the band to do stuff like out of their comfortability box. Like, because usually Brian Roger Brian comes on to anybody. Most of the times, if we ever get into that, maybe that's something I'll do after we get through the entire Queen catalog. I'll go back and get some of those guest live appearances. He would come on, he'll do Time Roller Down. It was just like kind of like the easy thing. You just go on anywhere he goes, it's Time Roller Down. He'll do We'll Rock You. The same kind of thing. You'd always do this kind of the big hits kind of thing. Taylor always wanted to do deeper stuff. He always wanted to do the stuff that no one ever gets listened to, except unless you're a big fan of Queen like he is. So I have no doubt that he pushed Brian to do this. It was a small sweaty club, something that Brian Roger probably haven't played for in years. So yeah, I love the moment. And I wish we could have gotten more of it. I wish we could have gotten like a full release of that live, because it would have been a lot of fun to watch that happen. Obviously, Taylor and Roger getting to play drums together. Taylor loves that. Roger having the time of his life. Brian having a great time on the lead vocals there, letting the Taylor's guitarist, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, guitarist for the Coattail Riders, playing the actual guitar solo. That's pure Brian. Brian lets that happen all the time. He's like, yeah, sure. He's a very gentleman of rock. That's what I've always heard about Brian. I do love it. I do love it quite a bit. Again, just wish the quality was better. What are you gonna do? Well, what do I rate this song? What do I rate this song? On a scale of 1 to 11, which we always hear up to 11 here on PLD Projects, I'm going to give this one a solid 9.5. Solid 9.5, which means it does not slide into my top 10. Because right now, my top 10, the number 10 slot is held by In the Lap of the Gods at 10 out of 11. That means all the other ones are 10 at 10.5 or 11. So Long Away does not quite make it, but I do really appreciate it. Now let's rank these and get the crown jewel. Why not? The crown jewel version of it. This is kind of an easy week. Again, I don't listen to the instrumental demo. It's not something we do. We have the 3 versions to rank. I'm going to just put them in order. I'm not going to make you wait any longer. The Live in London 2010's got to be at the bottom, only because of the sound quality. Only because of the sound. I would definitively put it above the Queen and Paul Rogers Live in Japan because it's only a snippet. But unfortunately, that feedback makes it I can't really put it into a playlist anywhere. Sad but true. So that means with that, I'm saying Queen and Paul Rogers is next to the snippet, so I'm not going to put the snippet at the top, right? So without further ado, there you go. Crown Jewel. This week is the album version, and we're better for it. It has much more of the harmonies that we get to hear. Roger's great vocal line, John's inimitable bass playing throughout. This is where it's at. It's the album version for me, for the Crown Jewel of Long Away. Next week's Crown Jewel, we kind of continue the Night at the Opera and Day at the Races as companion albums, so to speak. A lot of people have said that Somebody to Love would be Bohemian Rhapsody's companion piece because Somebody to Love was the big, well-known track, big gospel tracks, a different genre. I would disagree. To me, it's next week's song, The Millionaire Waltz. Millionaire's Waltz, written by Freddie, feels a lot closer to me as Bohemian Rhapsody because there's a couple of tempo shifts, genre shifts, a little bit of a strange track overall. Freddie's real epic type numbers. So I think this is the Bohemian Rhapsody of this album, although it's a lot less known. They're kind of a hidden gem, so to speak. One of my favorites on the album, though. I think it's a really cool song to listen to, so I can't wait to talk about it. Now, again, not many other alternative versions, so it'll be a shorter episode for those of you who are keeping track of that. But that is next week's episode of The Millionaire's Waltz. And there you have it, folks. That is this week's episode. I thank you for listening in. Thanks for being part of the audience. And if you like what you hear, if you want to hear more, go back into the vaults, find it. Also, click that like, click that subscribe. You'll always hear when we're going live with a new episode of Crown Jewels. We start getting towards the end of the 70s and into some of the solo works. A lot of fun that's going to be. And also, of course, if you want to join even further, join the Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. I do a lot of movie podcasts and some music ones as well. A lot of great people like Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kearns, Brendan Buckingham, Jeff Alterman. I couldn't do it all without them and without the rest of us as well. They really helped me keep the lights on. I really appreciate you guys. It's phenomenal. Your support is just absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, so if you can't join the Patreon, I totally get it. But if you can just help me by sharing, subscribing, liking, pushing it, letting your friends know about it, letting other Queen fans know about it if they're out there. I want to hear me blabber on about it. From a layman's perspective, that's how I look at it. I'm not the technical guy. I'm a layman, of course, but I have a lot of fun talking about it. Let me know what you think. That's this week's episode. We will stay tuned for next week, and I will see you then. But until then, keep yourself alive, guys. God save